So we're back with hour 2. We're going to spend a little bit of time poking around, doing a bit of a review with JavaScript arrays. Do a simple array, then we'll look at nested arrays, just to kind of have a bit of a refresher on how we work with these things, because that's, like we said, that's all our data is going to be in that format using JSON in the course. So we'll go back to our JS bin. I'll just add, comment out our stuff. So here's the first thing I want you to do. Actually, this says favorite food. Let me just modify this for a minute. Rather than your favorite food, will be more specific. You can just refresh the lesson 2 folder. So in your JS bin, I want you to create an array, and inside, put in your 3 favorite kinds of fruit. And then give the array a descriptive name. Don't call it array1 or call it X. And then I want you to log out to the console just the first element in there. So take a couple minutes and try this out in JS bin, then we'll go over it together, and then we'll move on to the next step. So you're just doing what I've highlighted in blue for right now. So create the array, give it a descriptive name, put 3 values in, and log out the first value. Okay, so how can we declare our array? And what should we call it? So let. Okay, well, I asked you for fruit, so it's probably best off to call it fruit. Oh, yeah, for fruit? Yep. Okay, so what do we have? Akash, what do you have after this? What should we do next? Okay, so square brackets, yeah, because it's an array. And then what should go inside there? Okay. What's one thing in your list? All right. We write it like this. We could use double or we could use single. Both would be correct, which is kind of standard practice in JavaScript, singles or doubles. Yeah, single quotes would be standard. Okay. What else should we put on our list? Jacob, what's on your list? All right. Each item separated by commas and with quotes around each particular item. Helen, what's in your list? Anything else? All right. Okay. So we're creating the array with let. Notice also, it works in my console, but it does give me a yellow warning. It underlines it. And when I mouse over, it says, this is ES6. Notice at the top here, the very top, if I scroll up, oh no, sorry, I did change it to ES6. Yours might say JavaScript, but we can actually change it to do ES6. If you want to use React code, you can run it in here. TypeScript, you can run that stuff in here as well. So how would I display the first element? Okay, and we need the console log. So fruit 0 is going to give us the first value in that array. Our arrays always start at position 0 rather than position 1. So that'll give me whatever's first in the list. It's fruit and square bracket 0. So there's your next task. You're going to need to use a loop. And we want to loop through the array and output all of the values. So take a couple minutes. There are a few different loop structures. Probably the most common one when we're working with an array is a for loop. So see if you can get your for loop to work. So it will print out, rather than just the first value, it'll print out all the elements in that array. If you're not entirely sure of the structure for a for loop, it's in the slides. They're on Blackboard. Probably have it. Something like this would be our loop. So remember, we're going to need to know what number to start at, what number to finish at, and how to increment each time we go around the loop. Okay, yeah, so now you need something in here. How do you refer to the current element in the array? Everything you've got is right, you just need something inside those square brackets. What value represents the current element in the array? Or is this one? After you're using that very, so you just inject it in there. Oh, that's just what JSBin does. That's just the website. This website puts it on there. That's all.
We have to link the JavaScript file. I think I deleted it.
Well,
But I don't know the name of it. So
you don't need the HTML. You don't need a separate file. I think you can just run it right here.
I'm not seeing how I don't remember the name.
I'm not sure. I never worked with the HTML window in there.
Oh, you did? Yeah. I don't know if the JavaScript file is linked, so it does not have it.
Were you editing it in the console?
I was just trying to get it to show up on like the output instead of in the console. I know he's going to go. I don't know if you have to link this in here because it might fit automatically behind.
So how you get it?
If it wasn't there at the start, yeah. But it still outputs it in.
So we're going to need some
Which
kind
is
of
gonna
for
be-
loop here. What number do we want to start our loop at? 0. What number do we want? How do we know when to end? Right, when it's at the length of our array, that's the end. And then how are we going to increment? Yeah, with plus plus. So each time we go around, we're going to add 1 to the counter I. So we go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then we're going to stop. You can actually use a for each loop in JavaScript. For each loops generally are used, though, when we have a strongly typed object for each type of some collection of strongly typed objects, but JavaScript's loosely typed. So it is possible to do a for each loop in JavaScript, but you won't see it very often because our objects are not strongly typed. It is possible to do, though. If you look, you can find a way to do it. So what would I need in here if we want to start at 0? Okay. So we'll create a variable, and typically for counters we use I. We're going to create a variable with let, call it I, and we're going to give it an initial value of 0. So that's where we want to start our counter, at 0. What's the next part of our for loop?
It's less than 3.
We could say 3, except what if somebody goes and changes the values, right? Adds more fruit or deletes something, then 3 won't be accurate. So we want to go, so long as I is less than the length of our array, keep going. Once I equals the length of our array, we want to stop. And then we can use our plus plus. So each time our loop goes around, we increment I, we increase that number by 1. So in this case, I should loop 3 times, 0, 1, 2, and that's it. And then what happens inside? So we want to output the current element in the list. So food and then square brackets I. So the first time, sorry, that should be fruit. Not exactly sure why it's, oh, whoops, that should be a semicolon, not a comma. So 3 parts of our loop. Start at 0, loop so long as we're less than the number of elements in the array, and add 1 each time. So now when we run it, we get each value. We want to use fruit.length because if we add something new, what else is in somebody's list? Let's add 1 more fruit now. So now rather than having 3 elements, I've got 4. We won't have to rewrite any of our code because our ending value is dynamic. It depends on how many items are in the list. So when I run it now, we haven't had to rewrite this. This length is also case sensitive. If I run it with a capital L, I get nothing. No error, but that doesn't evaluate to 4. So that has to be lowercase for JavaScript to know what it is.
There's a different way to, I don't know, instead of doing setting the I variable, you just do let value of fruit in the, and then you reference value and you log it.
Yep, that would work as well. You could even use a for each loop.
Is that's something newer?
Yes, that's something newer. This is typically what we'll see with the JavaScript array, is using the length property, going from 0 so long as we're below the length.
Variable I represent index value, right?
Yes.
So how does it know it can contain string as well? I mean, how does it print the value?
Well, when we say fruit I, so the first time around I is 0, so it's looking for the element at position 0 in the array, which is going to be this one. So it takes that value out and now logs it. I'm not sure I'm answering your question exactly.
I think there's integer value.
Yes.
How does it pull the string value from the array and print it?
Because the integer value, when we combine it in the array, that's just a pointer to a particular location in the array, right? Because that's what we did here, right? When we used fruit 0, here, the first time we hard coded it. So fruit 0 means whatever that first element is, which could be a string, it could be a date, could array. Okay, think of it this way. Think of, right? It's like saying, who's number 10 on Barcelona? Well, at the moment, it's Messi that's wears that shirt, right? But 10 years from now, it'll be someone else. So we can still refer to number 10 on Barcelona, but it will be a different something different in that container. So it's basically just a container, a placeholder for a value. Okay, we're going to try one other array example. We'll skip the rest of this. So here we've got, now this starts to look like some JSON data. We actually have a two-dimensional array, and we've got one array nested inside of another one. So our primary array is a list of food: sushi, tacos, and pizza. But then within each one of those elements, it has its own subarray, its own list inside of it, in effect. So what we want to do is we want to copy and paste this array into JSBin. But then we want to use, we're going to need two loops. We want to display the list of food and the ingredients this way. So we want to display a food and then do an indent and display a list of the ingredients and then the next food. So it should use this structure to display this data. So we're actually going to need two loops. One loop to go and get each row. And then within each row, first we're going to display the first element, and then we need a second loop, because notice sushi's got 3 ingredients, pizza's got 3, but tacos has 4 ingredients. So we're going to need one loop to get each of these, and then within that loop we're going to need a second for loop to get each of those sub-elements. So let's copy this to JSBin. So copy it in and see if you can use two loops to try and present the data this way. My suggestion is first, just don't even worry about the ingredients. First, just try and get it to say sushi, tacos, and pizza. That part should be easy. And then once you have that working, then see if you can get the remaining pieces to show up.
If we use square bracket after the sushi, the tacos, and the pizza, but
yes, I probably could have put it. You're right, Brad. I probably could have redone it. It'll still work this way,
yeah.
but it would probably make sense that this is in its own array. Yeah, I probably should have done it that way. I don't think I think I could.
Yeah.
If you add them in here, I think that's fine. That probably makes more sense. You don't have to. But yeah, I think that's better. I should. So the first element is the food, and the second element is then the list of ingredients. Maybe I'll modify that here. Good suggestion, thank you. Yes, I meant to update it that way. So yeah, if you grabbed it without those nested brackets, you may just want to copy it again. It should be this way. So you may need to copy it again to make sure you have brackets around the list of ingredients. It should be there. Now, when we're moving through, we want to refer for I, we want just the first element within I. Yeah, so, well, first, don't worry about the second move yet. Okay, and you also don't want to use the same variable in both. You'll need a different count. So for starters, just start with 1. Okay. Good start in there. So now we just want to bring those values next. So how do we refer to those values without this subarray? So in this record, what position is the name of the food? Yeah, so what is right? So it would be I and then 0. So we need another set of square brackets after. So I means the whole thing, and then within that array, position 0. I refers to that whole thing. How do we then access the element at that position? Yeah. So if I is the whole thing, what position is that going to be? Close, going to be I0. Okay, so you need both of those variables, and then that will give you the name.
Sushi taco pizza.
That's on there. How's it going here? You're close. That's the right idea. It's very just that we need square brackets around each of those values. I represents this entire thing. Sushi and the ingredients. The I0 represents the first element within that second array. So 0 is obviously giving you that whole thing each time. So you do need the 0 because you want the first column, but you need to reference both the row and the column. It's like a grid. So you need to provide two numbers. You're on the right track.
So is mine right here now?
Okay, you're getting there. So now what you need to do though is you now need to loop through that. That's where the second loop comes in. You now need to loop through that and display it like this, rather than displaying the whole thing as a list. You want to nest them this way. So for example, if we want to write it like this, so maybe we want to expose that as an API, so somebody else can come and consume that in that format. So it needs to be nested in this way.
Okay.
Right? Let's say you've got let's say this is a restaurant, and some app like Yelp or something wants to get your menu, right? Or wants to get your food list. So we can expose it this way as a JSON object, so they can take that data and do what they want with it. Or like a calorie counter, right?
Yeah.
They want to know what's in our food, so they can analyze it and display a calorie count. Maybe at Brad's restaurant, here's how we figured out the nutrition. We can't go to root dot length in the first array, right? That'll go 1, 2, 3 rows. But in our second loop, it's not the length of foods we need, it's the length of this array. So it's the length of foods I, right? That's I0. That's a whole subarray I1. Right, but it doesn't know what sushi is. That would be undefined. Yeah, so you want to, well, I would just define it as, so this whole thing is foods I, right? So foods I, so foods and then brackets I gives you this whole thing. So that's its own array. So now we need the first value within that subarray. Well, first, just deal with these. Just see first if you can get it to say sushi sauce. That's step one.
Yeah.
Once it's doing that, then you can do unique ingredients after. So now, yeah,
This is its array.
so now you need this value, I1 dot length. For your second. How many arrays we have, we need to loop through those. Okay, so now this is so instead of outputting the whole thing, we just want to output a sushi sauce already. So that would be I and what position.
Here's the array, and we have here. The one
Right, I and then out.
is another array.
So I0. The first element.
So if you I want to give one or 0, the first place is going to be.
No, I can't go back.
So I'm going to give you a little more time, but let's just maybe I'll give you one piece of this that might help. So if we just want to start by displaying sushi, tacos, and pizza, and we're going to ignore all the ingredients for now, what would our loop look like so that it would just display the word sushi, tacos, pizza? We only need one loop for this. We don't need the second loop yet. Yeah, so we'll want a 4. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay, so we're going to loop from 0 to the end of our array. And then how do we refer to just these elements, sushi, tacos, pizza? But what value are we logging out? Cass? Yeah, we will use 0.
I in square brackets and then 0 in square brackets.
You got it. So it's a 2-dimensional array. So I is the row. So the entire sushi line is food 0, but then within that we want the first element in that array. So this whole thing is food 0, but this value sushi is food 0, 0. So in effect, row 0, column 0. So now when we run this, we get sushi, tacos, and pizza. So that's a good place to start. So after we print out the first element at position 0, this is where we're going to need a second loop. So print out this, and then we need to loop through to display those before we go down to the next row, in effect. So we've got one loop. Now we're going to use a second loop. We probably should get a hint of what that syntax looks like. So we used I and 0 to get our food. We're going to need to use something similar to reference that array. So I'll give you a few more minutes to kick it around.
You can't use I again, right?
No, we can't. We don't want to use I again. We want to use, typically if we have 2 counters, we'll typically use I and J. So we'll want another loop. Again, that will start at 0. But the tricky part is, when do we end? We know we're going to start at 0, but how do we know? Because here we can't just hard code that as 3, because sushi has 3 ingredients, but tacos has 4.
So can you put the foods I0 and then put dot length of that?
Well, foods I0 refers to the food name. How do we refer to the second element? Jamin?
Oh, I1.
Foods I1 is the second position, right? If foods I0 is the name of the food, well, foods I1 is the list of ingredients. That's the second spot. Sorry, not I, it should be J. Well, actually, let's think about this.
Using the I from the top one.
Right, so foods I1 a length. So for the current food, after we print out the first value, we then need to loop through till the end of our ingredient list. So now how do we display each ingredient? That's the last piece.
So is it just console.log and then foods I1 J? And then I've also got brackets on it.
Let's try it. To take the current food, the second position, and then our second counter. Where in that nested array are we? Let's try it.
Rice, seaweed, fish, tacos, tortillas, meat, cheese, rice, pizza, dough, cheese, sauce.
My browser doesn't appear to be responding. We'll give it a minute. Maybe it'll come back. Does this work when you try it? You're frozen too?
I had to like copy my code, refresh the browser.
So I think we're in a loop that we're not coming out of, it looks like. That's why it's frozen. So we're close.
Oh, see, I didn't. Oh,
It's unresponsive.
yeah, because I've got it listed here like sushi and then rice, seaweed, fish, tacos, then tortilla.
All right, well, I'll go back. Yeah, I need to stop my script.